Bismillah, alhamdulillah, we give thanks to Allah for giving us another opportunity to appear on the ICOS e-learning program, the 6th episode of our government class. Inshallah, today we are to continue on reviewing some past questions in our government as we started last week. Last week, if you can remember, we treated 6 questions. But today, inshallah, I'm here with 7 questions. And I pray that Allah should assist us in order to review all the questions and make us understand it very well. The first question that we are looking at says, explain the term government as an institutional state. That is question 1A. Question 1B. In what 6 ways is government important as an institutional state? If you look at the question very well, the question is asking us about the meaning of government. The first chapter of our government syllabus that we learned in our JSS1. There, if you can remember, we defined government in 3 areas. 1, government as an institution of states. 2, government as an art or a process of governing. 3, government as an academic field of study. But this question is on the first one, as an institution of states. What is government as an institution of states? Government as an institution of states is defined as 3 organs of legislative, executive, judiciary, which constitutes what we call government and carry out all the government functions. That is the meaning of government as an institution of states. The main functions that these 3 organs are performing is law-making, law implementation, and law interpretation. These are the main functions. They do have other functions, but these are the main functions of the 3 organs. So government as an institution of state is these 3 organs of government that perform the function of law-making, law implementation, and law interpretation. That is number 1. The question number 2 says, 1B, say, in what 6 ways is government important as an institution of state? We want to look at the relevance of the government as an institution of state, the relevance of these 3 organs. It seems that the question is somehow technical or difficult, but very, very simple. If you look at the functions of government that we learned under the same chapter, the same topic, you look at it very well, you scrutinize it very well, you will see that all the functions are being performed by these 3 organs. And I told you in last class, I want to refer you back to it, when we were looking at the relevance of the Ogoni society in Yoruba political system. I told you that the relevance of the Ogoni are the functions that they performed during the time. Your relevance is the function that you are performing. So we want to look at the relevance of the government as an institution of state, which is the same thing with the functions that these 3 organs are performing. 1, lawmaking, the function of the legislature. 2, administration of justice, the function of the judiciary. 3, defense of the country, the function of the executive. 4, provision of employment, executive. 5, provision of social amenity, executive. Foreign policy, foreign diplomacy. Number 6, foreign diplomacy, that is the function of the executive. Number 7, the protection of the civil liberty, the function of the executive. Number 6, economic function, and the last one that I have here with me is the maintenance of law and order. We do have many other functions, so you can add to it. So you look at all these functions, we see that they are functions that are performed by these 3 organs. So that is the answer, correct answer to the question number 1B. 6 ways government important as an institution of state. So that is for that. Question number 2. Question number 2 says, explain the factors that responsible for the increased power of the modern executive. What are the factors that responsible for the increase in power of the executive? The question is telling us that executive this time around has powers that has increased in power. So what are the factors that bring about this increase in power, increasement in power? Number 1 that we are looking at is prerogative of mercy. If you look at it very well, prerogative of mercy is one of the functions of the executive. But this concept is one of the factors that increase the power of the executive, because the power of executive like that is extended to the judiciary domain. Because what is the meaning of prerogative of mercy? Prerogative of mercy is the ability of the executive to pardon the convicted people. This is the function of the judiciary. So now the executive has the power to do it. So it's one of the factors that increase the power of the executive. Prerogative of mercy. Number 2, delegated legislation. If you try to remember, delegated legislation is the power to make law given by the legislator to subordinate units or to other bodies that is not legislature. So this delegated legislation is one of the factors that increase the power of the executive, because the executive can make some minor laws which are delegated by the legislature by act of parliament. So it means that executive also extend to the domain of the legislature, because it can also make minor laws. Number 4, chief of armed forces. Executive, the president of the nation, which is the chairman of the executive arm of government, is the chief of armed forces of the country. That is, the control of the armed forces of the country is in the hand of the executive. So these are another factors that lead to the increase in power of the executive, because he has the power to deploy soldiers, to deploy navy and some other armed forces in the country. Number 4, veto power. Veto power is the ability of the executive to cancel or approve or declare otherwise on the action of the legislature. If legislature, for example, legislature is passing a certain law, the president can use veto power to reject that law. You know, the giving assent is one of the functions of the executive. So this is among the factors that increasing the power of the executive. Number 5, that is giving assent to the bill. Giving assent to the bill. We've already said this, that legislature is to make law, but they can never make a law when they are deliberating on a bill, because before we have law, we have bill. Bill be transformed to law after bill has already passed through 5 stages in the House. The first reading, I know you cannot forget that. The second reading, the committee stage, the report stage, and the third reading. After the third reading, which is the 5th one, it will now pass to the executive for giving assent. So if executive gives assent, it will become a law. So means that the completion of the law process is in the hand of the executive. These are another factors that gives executive an increased power over others. Number 6 is the appointment of the judges. Judiciary organ, which is the third organ, the appointment of the judges there is done by the executive. In no way the executive will appoint somebody that will not listen to him, which means that this extends the influence of the executive to the judiciary. So the power is increasing. So you should understand that. Then the last one that I want to look at, you can go and do other research to add to it. Yes, that is the function of students. When your teacher gives you something, few points, you should try as much as possible to add to those points given to you in the class. This last one, number 7, is the bill initiative. Bill initiative is the forwarding of the proposal to be passed by the legislature in order to become a law. So legislature, I believe executive, can also forward a certain proposal for the House to deliberate on it. So this makes the executive to have increased power. So these are the factors as regards the question, factors that increase the power of the executive. Now another question number 3. Question number 3 says differentiate. I think you can see it very well. Differentiate between legal sovereignty and political sovereignty. Differentiate between legal sovereignty and political sovereignty. The question is under sovereignty, the basic principle of government, where we are going to see concepts like rule of law and authority, power, legitimacy, and the sovereignty. So the basic concept of government. We have the basic concept of government, then we have the basic principles of government. Under basic principle of government, we have the rule of law, separation of power, checks and balances. But under the basic concept of government, we have the power, we have the authority, legitimacy, and the sovereignty. So under sovereignty, we have types of sovereignty. One of the types of sovereignty is legal sovereignty, another was political sovereignty. Now the question now says differentiate between legal sovereignty and the political sovereignty. Just to give the meaning of the two, and you make it know the difference that is between them. Number 1, the legal sovereignty is the sovereignty derived from the body of law, that is constitution, which is exercised by the lawmakers to enact law, to make law. Take it again. This legal sovereignty is the sovereignty that is derived from the body of law, that is from the constitution, which is exercised by the lawmakers to make law. That is legal sovereignty. That is, the lawmakers have the sovereign power to make law. That's the meaning of the concept. The lawmakers have the sovereign power to make law. Then the political sovereignty. This is the constitutionally derived sovereignty that is conferred upon the executive to enforce and maintain law and order. Take it again. Political sovereignty is the constitutionally derived sovereignty that is conferred upon the executive to enforce and maintain law and order. That is, the executive has the power, has the sovereign power to implement law. So this is the difference between legal sovereignty and political sovereignty. So the question number 2 of the question says, that is 1A, 1B. Identify 6 external limitation to the application of the sovereignty of a state. Under the first chapter of our government syllabus, we discussed states and we made us understand that state has some features. So one of the features of the state is sovereignty. That is the absolute power of the state over its territory without the intervention of the external forces. Now the question now says, identify 6 external limitations to the application of the sovereignty in the state. We said sovereignty is absolute power, but at the same time, it has limitation. Under the same topic, under sovereignty, we have the limitation in your textbook, we have limitation of the sovereignty. So what are the limitations? But this question is specifically on the external factors, external limitations. What are the external limitations? Is there under the limitation of the sovereignty? You just look at what are the factors, the limitation of the sovereignty of a state that is not within the state territory. Number 1, international law. So we have law, international law, that is guiding the behavior of all the countries in the world. So it is above everyone. So if it is applied in the state, so it will serve as limitation to the sovereignty of that country. Number 2, international organization. International organization is the body that a country belongs to as a member. So they do have their law. I said something related to it when we were discussing UNO. That is, UNO, as a member of the UNO, some policy there will influence your own policy, not under UNO. I can remember under foreign policy. So if you try to remember, go and check, rewatch the video on that topic. So what I'm trying to say in essence now is that international organization, the law in international organization that a country belongs to, like Nigeria belongs to UNO, OAU, ECOWAS. So that law, the law there can limit the sovereignty of our own states. That is number 2. Number 3, external aid. External aid. If we do have a country that is assisting a certain country, so that the country that they are assisting, the sovereignty at times may be limited by the country that is assisting you. So they may give you condition that is not go well with your own sovereignty, but you need to take it because you are receiving aid from them. Like Nigeria is receiving aid from Russia. For example, just of recent during this COVID-19 pandemic, China government sent some delegates, some people, experts to this country to assist us on this virus. So we don't have choice. If at time China comes and influence some policy, some domestic affair of this country, our sovereignty is going to be limited by the intervention of China because we are receiving aid from the country. That is external aid. Note that number 3. Number 4, diplomatic immunity. Diplomatic immunity is an external factor that limit the sovereignty of you. I told you under the limitation that diplomatic immunity is the immunity of the experts, of the ambassadors of another country in our own country. The law that is governing us in this country is not extended to their embassy, to the personality of the diplomats. So the person is an external to our own country, is an alien. So this is one of the factors, that external factors that limit the sovereignty of the country. Then influence of the powerful nation. Influence of the powerful nation. We do have powerful nations in the country, in the world today. We have majorly two powerful nations. We have United States of America and we have Russia. These two countries can limit the sovereignty of a country because they are powerful, because they can threaten you with economic sanction, military sanction, and some other things. So these are among the external factors that limit the sovereignty of the state. Then another one is the Amnesty International. Amnesty International is the organization that look into, forgiving some people, especially the political detainees. I can remember during Babangida regime, the Amnesty International, the international community said to the government of Babangida to release all the political detainees. It was then that Fela Anikulapo, who was imprisoned by the government of Buhari, was released, and some other political detainees. So the Amnesty International can influence or limit the sovereignty of a state. These are the answers to the questions. So the question number 1B of the identify 6 external limitation of the sovereignty in the state. Then another question. We want to look at another question. Question number 4. 4A says, what is separation of power? The second one says, how does separation of power operates under presidential system? The first one says, what is separation of power? The second one says, what does separation of power? How does separation of power operate under the presidential system of government? The first one, separation of power is defined as a political doctrine in which the governmental powers and functions are constitutionally shared among the arms of government in order to prevent abuse of power. Take it again. Separation of power is defined as a political doctrine in which the governmental powers and functions are constitutionally shared among the organs of government in order to prevent the abuse of power. Now, question number 1B. How does this separation of power operate under presidential system of government? We have two systems. We have the presidential system of government and we have the parliamentary system of government. In your textbook, in your notes, you will see it there. How separation of power operates under presidential, then how separation of power operates under the parliamentary system of government. But the question now is presidential system of government. That is, how the powers are separated among the organs under presidential system of government. Number 1, everybody knows that there is clear distinction of powers and functions among the organs under presidential system of government, unlike parliamentary system of government. Under parliamentary system of government, no clear cut separation of power. But under presidential system of government, there is clear cut well-pronounced separation of powers. Number one, the president and the ministers, that is the cabinet, are not the member of the legislative. That is, legislative organ is separate. The executive organ that comprises the president and the ministers, they are separate. That's number one. That is, the president, take it again, the president and his minister are not member of the legislative arm of government. Unlike parliamentary, I want to be relating it, where the cabinet and the prime minister are both members of the executive and the legislative. Number two, there is individual responsibility of each minister to the president. The powers are separated among the ministers. They have individual responsibility to the president, the person that appointed them in the first instance. Unlike parliamentary system of government, where the minister, the cabinet, are collectively responsible to the prime minister or to the parliament. That's number two, be noting it. Number three, judicial system is an independent organ of government. The judicial system is an independent organ of government. It's not the same thing with executive, at the same time with legislature. Under parliamentary system of government, the judges, the chief of justice, the person that are supposed to be in the judiciary is also member of the legislature. In fact, the supreme court system is under the legislature in the parliament. So you will see how the functions are fused together. We call it fusions of powers. So we do have what we call fusion of power under parliamentary system of government, but separation of power under the presidential system of government. Another one, the treaty. The treaty is the agreement that is made between one or two countries. The treaty is made by the executive, but the function of the approval function of the treaty is done by the legislature. You see how the functions are separated on the same concept. If executive make treaty with another country, the approval of that treaty is going to be done by the executive. Another one, the legislature made law, but the custodian of the law is the judiciary. The person that will be as the custodian that will keep the law is the judiciary. If this one is making law, that is separate function. Another one is keeping the law. That's another function separately from the first one. You have to make it and to keep it. The next one, the bill, though was passed by the legislature, but the assent to become a law is given by the executive. That's another separated functions on certain concepts. So these are how separation of power operates under presidential system of government. The time is running out. I will not be able to be writing it on the board. We want to take another question quickly because we are going to 7, and this is number 5 question. This question says, what is electoral system? 5A. 5B says, discuss 5 functions of Independent National Electoral Commission. What is electoral system? At times they may say, what is electoral process? Don't be convinced. You give the same meaning to it. Electoral system is a method of conducting election in a country. Take it today again. Electoral system is a method of conducting election in a country. Now, now the question number 2 says, discuss 5 functions of INEC. INEC is the name given to the Electoral Commission in Nigeria. The question is asking you, this is one of the applied questions. The question is asking you to supply your own answer under the function of the Electoral Commission, but you relate it to INEC. To relate it to INEC. So, Electoral Commission, you need to understand the body first. Electoral Commission is the body that is responsible for the conducting free and fair election in a country. If electoral process is the method of the conducting election, but the body that is conducting that election is called Electoral Commission. It's the same thing with INEC. In Nigeria, it was formerly called FEDECO. In Second Republic of Nigeria, it was called FEDECO. It was later changed to NEC, later changed to NECOM, but now we are using INEC. So what are the functions of INEC? I think the function of INEC is the same thing with the function of the Electoral Commission that you learned in your notes. Number one, demarcation of the constituency. Constituency is the political, is the geographical, is the political district meant for the purpose of election. That is an area created for the purpose of election. So the demarcation of that constituency is going to be done by the INEC. That is the constituency in this country. Look at the upper house. We do have 3 representatives. We have North Central, North Senatorial District. Sorry, we have the South Senatorial District. Then we have the Central Senatorial District. These 2 trees are the constituency. So it is demarcated by the INEC. Number 2, registration of voters. Before you are eligible to vote, you must be registered. The registration is going to be done by INEC. Registration of the candidates and political parties. All the candidates and political parties that wanted to partake in the elections, they are going to be registered by INEC. If INEC does not register you, you are not qualified to partake in the election. Education of the voters is the function of the INEC to educate through media, radio, television, to educate the voters, the electorate, how to go about the voting process. Recruitment and discipline of the electoral officers, the people, the personnel that is working in the electoral process. So it's the function of INEC to recruit them if at all they do wrong, to punish or dismiss them, discipline them. Sorry. Number 6, advise government on electoral system. So it's one of the functions of the INEC to advise government on the conduct of the election. Another one is counting of votes. So after the electorate has already cast their votes, so it's going to be counted by the INEC. Another one is the announcement of the election results. So INEC is the responsibility of INEC to announce the elections. So these are the functions of INEC. We do have other functions. Other functions. So you go and add to it. Number 6. Question number 6. The first one, 6A, says examine the reason why the People Democratic Party is a political party. It's a NECO question. Why PDP is a political party? PDP, we'll be hearing PDP, we'll be hearing APC and all these political parties. Why are they political party? What are the features in them for us to call them? Are they really political parties? The question is asking you to go and look at your own notes when you learn political party. Under political party, we have features of political party. If you do not know it before, you are going to know it today. Because I do discover that some textbooks do not have it. So that is one of the merits, the added value of what else in government. So all these things are contained in the textbooks. So what are the features of political party? So the feature of political party is the same feature of the Democratic Party. That is the reason why we call it political party, because it has the features of political party. That is answer. The first one is objective. PDP as a political party has an objective to achieve. An objective of any political party is to control power. If you have the member of the PDP, what do you want now? They want to control the presidency at Abuja. So that is the first one that characterizes the party to be a political party. Number two, manifesto. They used to do manifesto, rally. They go to Kaduna today, Oyo tomorrow, Osun a day after tomorrow, to propagate their own idea, to mobilize people for their own achievements. So that is one of the features of PDP that makes it as a political party. Number three, membership. PDP has members. Nearly all the states in the country. We have PDP in Osun, we have PDP members in Oyo, we have PDP members in Kwara State. So this characterizes the PDP to be a political party. Number four, ideology. PDP also has ideology, though they don't have defined ideology. No, a political party in this country, this Nigeria, unlike America, unlike Russia, so no a political party in this country that has a defined ideology. Anyway, I can say embezzlement of public funds is one of their own ideology. So may Allah forgive. Number five, organization. PDP has organization. They have the Central Working Committee, they have the chairman, national chairman, they have the state chairman, even local government chairman. So this is the structure of the party. So if a group of people has this, we can call it a political party, as we are saying that PDP is a political party for having this quality. Another one, number six, electoral method. So they have the method to achieve their own end. So a party used to have this. Political PDP has it. So that's why we call it a political party. Logo that will show that this is the party. PDP has an umbrella as their own logo. They write with three colors. PDP, power to the people. So this PDP power to the people statement is another point that make it a political party. That is slogan. A political party has slogan. So PDP also has slogan. PDP, power to the people. That is the popular democracy, and they used to say it. Then campaign. They used to campaign, telling people to vote for them during the election. These are the reasons why we call PDP a political party. Question number 2 under it, 6B. Highlight any 5 rules of minority party in multi-party system, multi-party democracy. What are the functions of the minority parties? We do have majority parties, then we have minority parties. These minority parties, what are their functions? First of all, let's look at multi-party system to refresh your brain. Multi-party system is a system in which more than 2 political parties are allowed to operate and struggle for power. Take it again. Multi-party system is a system in which more than 2 political parties are allowed to operate and struggle for gaining political power. So that's the multi-party system. So we have many parties. So under these parties, under this multi-party system, when we have many political parties, some are major parties, that is, they have large membership. Some are minor parties because they have small membership. So what are the functions? The question is now asking us, what are the roles? Role is also duties, it's also functions of minority party in a democratic system. 1. In multi-party system, minority party serves as a check on the activities of the ruling party, that is majority party. Minority parties serve as a check, watchdog on the activities of the majority party. The majority party, we assume, is the one that controlling government. Number two, it serves as alternative government if the ruling party fails to meet the aspiration of the people. That's number two. This one is operating under parliamentary system of government. I'm coming to say something on this so that you will understand and extend it to parliamentary system of government as well. Number three, it discourages emergency of de facto political party. The roles of the minority parties, one of the rules is that it discourages the emergency of the de facto political party. What do you understand about de facto political party? De facto political party. We have the job. These are two words. They are not that strange to you. I think you might have met them under the sovereignty. We have de facto sovereignty and de jure sovereignty. One is based on force, another one is based on law. But what is the meaning of de facto political party? De facto political party is a scenario where a political party dominates political atmosphere and prevent other party to win election. Take it again. De facto political party, or you call it de facto one party system, is when a party dominates the political atmosphere of a country and prevent other political party to control the government, as PDP did in the last three terms. So between 2003 and 2016 or so, PDP dominated the political scene of this country. So as if there is no other political parties. That's what we call de facto political parties. So they may also call it hegemonic political parties. It can also be called a dominant political party. So one of the functions where we come from, one of the functions of the minority party is to discourage the emergency of the de facto political party. So we will not have what we call de facto political party in our political scene in the country when we have this minor party, because they will win some minor elections, making the majority party not to become a de facto party. You should understand that. Number four, it widens political education and choices of the people. When we have only one party, so we have only our choice is going to be restricted. The education that we are going to have on politics is from them. But all these minor parties, they also have their own programs. So it's one of the advantages. They are like other choices to the electorate. Number five, it protects the interest of minority group in a country. Minority group, like Nigeria is an heterogeneous society. So if we have this minority party, though they are restricted to Oyo, or they are restricted to Western region. So at least the people of the Western region, they are going to be represented through this minority party in Nigeria political system. I should give you an example. Just of recent, it was just of recent that APGA is not winning election in eastern part of the country, and APGA is one of the regional political party. At least it's winning election for the Igbo people, because it was established by the Igbo man that agitated for the Igbo political independence and representation. So this is one of the functions of the minority party, the roles of minority party. Number six, it aids in preventing government from violating fundamental human rights of the citizens, since they are serving as the watchdog, as I said it in point number one. So they will prevent the government, the ruling government, to violate the fundamental human rights of the people. They will be saying it out. Our government is doing this till the people will be hearing it from them, and they will stand for their own right. So it's one of the functions. Number seven, it contributes to the parliamentary debate and passage of the bill, because they are also there in the house, though they are minority, but they also contribute to the debate of a bill. Then the last one that we have for ourselves under the functions, roles and duties of minority party is it collaborates with the ruling party in building national integrity. So it collaborates with ruling party, that is majority party. So when they want to build the national integrity. I want you to know something. I said it when I was discussing the first or second point, that this minority party, we can use the information under it for the opposition party as well, which is useful under the parliamentary system of government. So inshallah, we are going to stop here after we have already taken a look at 7 questions of different kinds from different topics. We are to continue from this, inshallah, till we reach the last topic of the government syllabus. I implore everybody to pay attention to all this so that it will assist you in your exam. So I pray that Allah should make it is easy for every one of us. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Happy Ramadan Kareem.